Tired? Stressed out? Overworked?
I've had it! Enough already! It
doesn't have to be that way. Your host, Bob Roth, Executive Director of the David Lynch Foundation, has learned that you can thrive without tension in this fast-paced world. This is Success Without Stress with Bob Roth on Sirius XM Indie.
This is Bob Roth, Success Without Stress, Sirius XM Indie, and I'd like to welcome everybody back, and I am a very fortunate guy because on this show, every few weeks, every month or so, I get to talk to some extraordinary people about their tools or techniques for success, and that includes, at the foundation for some of them, Transcendental Meditation. But the main thing is, I get to talk to extraordinary people, and in the past, many of you know that I've spoken with Jerry Seinfeld, and I interviewed David Lynch, of course, and Hugh Jackman, and Lena Dunham, and right up there at the tippy top of just a beautiful human being and a very successful in his craft and a dear friend is my guest this hour, Barry Zito. And most of you will know Barry Zito was a top major league pitcher with the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants for 12 or 13 years. 13 years, Barry? 13 years. He was the Cy Young Award winner for the American League in 2002, which means he was the greatest pitcher in the American League in 2002 and one of the two best pitchers in the country. He was a three-time Major League Baseball All-Star. He was the Sporting News Pitcher of the Year. He received the Hutch Award, which I'd like to talk to you a little bit more, in 2012, and the Lou Gehrig Memorial Award winner in 2012, both of them testimony to Barry's heart and soul, and World Series champion in 2010 and 2012. All that stuff aside, Barry, you're taking a year off. What are you doing now? Let's have a chat. Tell me what you're up to these days.
Firstly, it's great to be here, and I haven't done an interview, I think, since last September, so I've just kind of gone, a little bit underground and been with the family, but it's just awesome to be able to have an interview with you, a personal friend, and also, just a great show. So, what happened last year was really difficult for me on a lot of fronts. I lost my father and over the summer, and was just having a tough time, with my pitching and my delivery, and things were just out of sync, and I think had been getting out of sync slowly for years. And so I made the kind of an internal decision last August that I wanted to take a full year off of baseball. And so many guys, they're forced either to go ahead and go into retirement, maybe because their ego doesn't want to let them, end up getting released, or they don't want the game to shut the door, so they go, well, I'm going to shut the door on the game. And, of course, most of these guys regret it 6 months later after they've had a little break. So I didn't want that paradigm, and I certainly didn't want to go back to spring training just because I just wasn't ready to go back into baseball yet. I needed to take a breather. So I've been having a great time. I moved to San Diego from L.A., and my wife and I just had a baby, a little boy named Marsden, and 6 weeks ago, and have just been pitching and working out and throwing and, tweaking some things that I've wanted to tweak for years and years. But, in baseball, you get about 2 or 3 months to make any changes after every season. And, I wanted a whole 12 months. So it's just been awesome. And I plan on going back to spring training in February.
Barry and I met, I think, February 3 years ago at spring training in 3 years ago, I think, spring training in Arizona. When I talked to you and your beautiful wife and now mother of Mars. And I think one of the great experiences of my life was to walk into your rented home and to see all these books on art and books on philosophy and your guitar and just you're such a well-rounded person. And, even Greg, my producer here, was saying, when you call your number, there's classical music on your answering machine. You didn't sort of strike me as the classic jock. I mean, has baseball been your whole life? Or, how has baseball fit into your life? Did you consider yourself sort of consumed by it in your early years? How do we get from there to here?
Well, I was raised in a home full of artists, I think, and that's maybe why my personality is a little more different. But on my mother's side, my grandmother started a spiritual teaching in the 60s, and that was the church I was raised in. So I was kind of raised a little more out of the box spiritually speaking. And then on my father's side, my father was a conductor and arranger for Nat King Cole for 10, 15 years. And my mother sang with Nat. She dropped out of college to go sing with Nat at the age of 19, and they met each other and fell in love. And so, music is kind of what I was raised with, and the artistic side, creativity and all that. And then, when I was 6 or 7, we moved to San Diego from Vegas, and I ran out, to the middle little circle on the T-ball field for whatever reason. I don't know why. And my dad very much helped me cultivate that joy that it brought me. And that's kind of how baseball was brought in. But my roots are not basic. It's not like I come from an athletic, family, or I was not raised, by like a militant father who told me that if I didn't succeed on the field that I was worthless. And, a lot of these guys have a chip on their shoulder, and I think that's what helps a lot of them in their athletic performance. But for me, I think I'm just kind of a boring, nice guy, maybe.
No. Now, what role has meditation, transcendental meditation, had in your life? What interested you about it? When I know our mutual friend, Buddy Biancalana, who was a starting shortstop with the Kansas City Royals for many years and starred in their 1985 World Series. He said had he started meditating while he was a player, it would help the quality of his life on the field and that life. But what was it that attracted you to meditation, and, why do you practice it?
Yeah, I mean, being raised kind of spiritually, as I mentioned, I was always exposed to meditation, but I never really committed to any regimens. And I never, I don't know, I kind of went through the motions a little bit, and I really tried to get a lot out of it. But it seemed like a lot of pressure. It seemed like, God, am I doing this right? Am I getting to the right state of mind? And the thing that I loved about TM when you came out and taught Amber and myself was that all that pressure was taken off. It was, you were saying, listen, you can't do this wrong. You just sit there, you go through it for 20 minutes, you say your mantra, and you just relax, you chill out, you're going to kick some stress off. You do whatever you have to do, and there's no right or wrong way to do it, and I think that's the allure of it for me. And then it's a little sanctuary that I get to go to. I'm kind of a private person in a lot of ways, and I almost consider it going like into my own little, dark little telephone booth or closet for 20 minutes and in my own mind, and I get to just be, totally alone and away from the craziness and unpredictability of the world.
It sounds very familiar. I know that experience, particularly your desire to be alone. So, and that's interesting when you're standing out on a mound with 50,000 people either cheering for you or against you, and runners dancing off the bases, and it's the sixth inning. And what do you need in that point? This show is called Success Without Stress, and obviously, I don't define stress as challenges. Stress are not challenges and pressures and all that. Stress is how we respond to those challenges and pressures, and that we have a choice, that we can either buckle or we can rise above it. And how does meditation help you handle those pressures and challenges in your life? On and off the field.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think, like you said, in pitching, you're out on the field, and when I've been at my best, I feel like I'm all alone out there. I feel like I'm in this little bubble of just serenity, and I'm just going through my delivery one at a time. And all around me is all this craziness, and even 60 feet away is some other stuff that I could get very much wrapped up in and, fearful about. But, it's staying in that bubble of, I guess, the solitude, really. And that stems from the TM because, you can be sitting in a crowded room or on a bus or, I've talked to you about stories where you were meditating in a broom closet and things like that when you were younger and, things were really loud around you, but you're in your own little bubble. And I think if, as human beings, if we can all find a place in ourselves to just go and feel quiet, like we don't have to cater to, all the world's demands, even for 20 minutes a day or twice a day, it's going to help. It's going to carry over into every aspect.
And did you like standing on the field? Now, this is just, here I'm going to preface this by saying, I had a very interesting experience, and I thought of you. I was invited I taught Bruce Wilpon, who's the son of the owner of the New York Mets, Fred Wilpon, to meditate. Bruce said, well, why don't you come and watch a game in my dad's suite at Citi Field for the New York Mets? And I thought, that's great. I'll go hang out with Bruce. And lo and behold, I spent the night sitting next to Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax, as people you may not know, was one of the greatest pitchers of all time, a lefty with the Brooklyn Dodgers and the LA Dodgers, and my arch nemesis as a San Francisco Giant fan starting in 1958 or 59. And it was very interesting sitting next to him because in a way he reminded me a lot of you in his sort of witnessing of the whole sport. Like I said to him, do you watch games? Do you love baseball when you're not pitching? And he sort of said, well, not really. I mean, I got a life. I like the sport, but I also have a life. And I remember asking him a question. Clay Kershaw was pitching for the Dodgers, and he was just rolling along for several innings, and all of a sudden there was a walk, and then there was a base hit, and then, the Mets scored a couple runs. And I said to Sandy, I said, well, what happened? What happened with Clay? What happened there? And he said, Bob, we're talking a half an inch here. We're talking like minuscule, the ball by a half an inch here or there. And did you notice that base hit was just by an inch fair down the third base line? And so I was thinking about you, in pitching, and two questions. One, do you relate to what he says about, there's more to life than just throwing just that time you're on the mound, and also just baseball being a game of inches for you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's difficult, I think, for anyone that's truly following their passion and their dream, and they're following their heart and working, and it happens to be a career as well. But when you have I think it's a risk really to follow those dreams, and when you're doing that, it's very difficult to not define yourself by that. I think if you're working a job that you're not totally invested in with your heart, it might be a little easier that you're defined in other ways as a human being. But when you're all in, man, with your heart, greatest risk, greatest reward, it's hard to not be defined. And I think that's the plight of, most major league players, is that if we're not playing well, to still feel that sense of value. So, I do agree with what Sandy says, and certainly there is a lot more to life. But in those playing years, man, it's hard to separate from that, and I can say after taking a year off this year, I realized completely that there's so many other things I bring to the table than, just being a ball player. But it's a little tougher to have that perspective, when you're out there every 5 days and, people are talking about you and all that stuff.
But before you go on, Buddy Biancalana said that he remembered when he was playing with the Omaha Royals at the AAA that in a night game he made 3 errors and the team lost. And he was trying to fall asleep, and then he woke up at 3 a.m. and, he turned on the radio, and there was a sports announcer just like lambasting him for making 3 errors. And he said, you can't get away from it. And I think this is something that those of us who aren't professional athletes or amateur or whatever can never imagine sort of what enormous pressures you have, and you're not able to sort of express it. You can't talk about it. You can't complain. But, oh, my gosh, any comment on that?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I just heard a story from a friend of mine. But, it's as players, it's easy for players to be seen as, oh, well, they have this whole life and this, and, it doesn't affect them. But myself and tons of guys through the years, when they're going tough, they don't even want to go out in batting practice and stand in the outfield because fans are all over them. And, we're human beings like everyone else. But we also have to realize that fans are, it's entertainment, and just because someone's screaming at you at the stadium or on the media doesn't mean that they have a personal vendetta against you. And the story that I remember was a friend of mine was talking about Robbie Cano, who, of course, used to be a Yankee and now is in Seattle. And he was doing like a talk show, like a late night talk show or something, and they had all the fans, and they're like, Robbie, like, what the hell, like, how could you leave the Yankees and this and that, and talking all this stuff. And then Cano walked out kind of to surprise these fans right out of the door, and instantly they went from that adversarial approach right into, oh, Robbie, man, how you doing? Oh, hey, what's going on? Yeah, no, I understand, you got a family, you got to take care. So once you realize that these people that are saying all this stuff can turn on a dime, and at the end of the day, they're just having their entertainment for the day. So you just can't take that stuff too personally.
This is Success Without Stress with Bob Roth on Sirius XM Indie. Celebrities, CEOs, veterans, and students have learned through Transcendental Meditation that you can live your life free from anxiety, tension, and fatigue. This is Success Without Stress with Bob Roth on Sirius XM Indie.
Welcome back. This is Success Without Stress on Sirius XM Indie. This is your host, Bob Roth, and I am with my very dear friend and all-star Cy Young award-winning pitcher, Barry Zito. We're talking about Transcendental Meditation. We're talking about life. We're talking about sports. We're talking about a lot of things. He's a great man, and let's continue. One of the things that was most moving for me, Barry, was the way you pitched. I mean, I have to preface by saying, like, I am a serious San Francisco Giants baseball fan, and a baseball fan in general. I mean, I grew up listening to from 1958 when the Giants were playing at Seal Stadium, and I fell in love with Willie Mays. I had a Willie Mays glove, and I when I was in Little League, my first desire was to be a professional baseball player, and thankfully my parents didn't let me. Otherwise, I'd still be kicking around the D leagues right now, the minor leagues. But it's so important to me, baseball. So to hear you. And people were larger than life. There was a player when I was 10 years old. It was Jimmy Davenport was on third base, and I remember I had my $2.50, and I know this is boring to you guys because you hear this stuff all the time, but $2.50 reserve seat tickets at Candlestick, $2.50 for reserve seats, and I didn't have the $3.50 to sit in box until, close in, until the game was almost over, and I sat in the front row, and there was like Jimmy Davenport. He was like 23 years old, but he was sort of a god, and you have to deal with that all the time. Do you tire of people talking to you about baseball? Do you tire of being, I was here, or, my dear friend Greg Sahakian here, who's a fabulous producer for Sirius, and do you tire of that, or do you enjoy it, or how do you feel about that?
It's funny you ask. I think on different days or different years, I would give you a different answer, but, I spoke to you a little bit yesterday, and I just told you that I'm just trying to get back to the innocence and the sheer joy of this game that really propelled me into the career as I started it, in 2000 with the A's. And I think what happens is these guys, and myself included, we put on this armor, to guard ourselves against this threat of, whatever it is. Well, it's a world out there that's condemning us or telling us we're not enough, or, all these things that we can draw off of the experience, getting booed or, whatever that is. But when it's all said and done, I mean, it's a beautiful game, and every guy that plays it truly loves it from his heart. And I love baseball from my heart, and that was another big reason I took this year off, was to really fall back in love with baseball again, because I was starting to get so bitter and angry, and it wasn't bringing me joy. It was a source of stress, and I'd rather not be out there than be out there. And I was like, how could, this love that I've had since I was a kid be so, turned upside down? And like I said, I've seen so many guys retire because they just wanted to kind of pull the power play on the game and say, the game's not going to shut me out. I'm going to shut it out. And a lot of these guys, personally, that I've spoken to, said, God, man, I wish I would have kept going until, they had to rip that jersey off my back. They just were so bitter they couldn't even go on the field anymore, You're
very articulate with this, Barry, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and the listeners about this. I think one of the highlights, there's a few highlights that I remember of following the Giants, and one was, when I first saw Willie Mays hit a home run, another time in 1971 when he was towards the end of his career and he was floundering with the Giants, and I was at a doubleheader, and I'm bringing this back to you in just a moment. And he had popped up and was just playing really poorly, and all the fans were pulling for him. And finally, in the bottom of the ninth, in the second game, with the bases loaded and the Giants down by 2, and he struck a horrible game. He tripled off the top of the left center field fence, and everybody in the stands were crying. They were so angry with him, and that for so long, because he had been failing, and then they just were loving him. And the way the fans in San Francisco treated you on your last game at the end of the 2013 season?
Last year.
Yeah, last year. Big standing ovation. I mean, the people in San Francisco love you so much, and they know that you just put your heart and soul in everything. That was a highlight for me, Barry, in that sports thing. And but I want to spin back around to meditation. This is Bob Roth, Success Without Stress, and we're talking about tools for success and life. And at the core of it is the people I've been interviewing practice Transcendental Meditation, which is a simple, natural, effortless technique that is not a religion or not a philosophy, not a change in lifestyle, something that allows an individual to access a level of calm that exists deep within every human being all over the world at all times. And that access, that settling down and experiencing that, produces a constellation of very important and healthy changes in the physiology. It gives the body a profound state of relaxation. It reduces a bad hormone called cortisol, drops it by 30 or 40%, and that is produced by the body and the adrenal glands when we're feeling anxious. And if we get a good night's sleep, if we do, cortisol levels just drop 10 or 12%. So that 30 or 40%, huge ramifications for improved sleep, improved happiness, less depression, less anxiety, better digestion, all these things. And so with this show, we're sort of talking to people about the use of transcendental meditation. And I also head up something called the David Lynch Foundation, which is bringing TM to at-risk populations, in particular veterans and their families who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And I want to come back to your foundation in a moment, Barry. And also inner-city school kids. We provided scholarships for about 500,000 inner-city school kids to learn to meditate in schools all over the U.S. and all over the world. And also women who are survivors of domestic violence, which is just a crime against humanity as far as I'm concerned. And I say all that because Barry has participated with and visited some schools and talked to some people about, and talked to students, inner-city school kids in San Francisco who meditate. And what was your experience with that, Barry? And why did you go? Why did you go?
Yeah, no, that was incredible. I went because it's always been intriguing, the whole, just the profound effects of TM and the cortisol stuff I'd never heard before. I got a lot of the facts initially from Dr. Norm Rosenthal's book that you recommended, Transcendence, which really kind of got me going with TM at the beginning. But the cortisol stuff is pretty amazing. The reason I wanted to do it, though, was, first, selfishly, I wanted to see you and come out and give you a hug. And then really just to see the work that David and yourself have been doing all over this country and beyond. And seeing a bunch of kids that, what I was told, they couldn't even sit in the same auditorium, I think a year or two before, because there was so much fighting and arguing and dissension, that they were just peacefully sitting next to each other, just having their quiet time. And that was so unbelievable for me and my wife Amber to be a part of.
You have a foundation, a charity called Strike Out for Troops. Want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Strike Out for Troops is, my family started it, myself, my father and mother, back in 2005, and it wasn't so popular to be supporting the troops back then. I think people were mixing up supporting the war with supporting our fellow Americans. And now, that whole movement has taken off, which is so great to see. But we came up with something where we wanted baseball and the military to kind of pair up, or at least just we wanted baseball, the greatest, sport in this country, to support the U.S. military and to support the troops, support the men and women that were going out there and coming back injured and giving up life and limb. And so we have had a great run, and it's been on hold just for a little bit while I was taking this year off, and we have some really great plans with Strike Out for Troops, and we're going to kick it off in a bigger and better way here in the next probably 6 months, and it's just very exciting stuff.
It's great. Anything we can do to support your effort, I'm your guy.
Absolutely.
What was it like pitching in the minor leagues, traveling in the minor? This is going way, way back to 1999, but for those listeners who don't know, the major leagues, the show, this is like everything's first class, everything's great. You're staying in the fanciest hotels, you get the big salaries.
Yeah, of course.
Minor leagues, it's like there's no gradation. It's like sort of, well, I guess AAA is not so bad, but it's sort of like hell and heaven. So, and you talk to some people who are kicking around the minors for like decades. So what was your experience in the minors? And did you ever get undermined? Did you ever think, oh God, I'm never going to make it to the majors? And you talk to your dad or you talk to some friends and then sort of come back up?
Well, it's funny you mentioned, because we call it like the inverted pyramid. You got guys at the lowest levels of the minors, playing in the smallest towns across the U.S., and, they can barely get like a pair of cleats. They're making, well, back when I was playing, we were making about $850 a month in salary, and they can't even afford a pair of shoes. And then, of course, when you're making millions, you can, you're also getting everything for free. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I was fortunate. I went to a few schools, and I ended up at USC in '99. And when I went and signed with the A's in June of that year, I went right to high A ball. So the A's were very aggressive, and they put me in high A, and I performed well. And 6 weeks later, they called me up to Double A. And 2 weeks after that, I went up to Triple A for the playoffs because a lot of the Triple A guys were going up to the big leagues in September. So I was able to get to the big leagues in about 12 months total, and came up that next year in July. So I was very much blessed and fortunate to not be spending, so many, 12-hour bus rides across the southern states, Alabama, Mississippi, like a lot of these guys do. But it was actually a lot of fun. There was so much camaraderie at those levels, and, the game is purely for fun at those levels, and you feel like you're really just playing cards with the guys, and people are sitting around just talking a bunch of crap to each other. So that kind of stuff, wasn't as prevalent the higher up we went.
I was talking to, this is a name drop, but I was talking to Katy Perry a few weeks ago, who's also practices Transcendental Meditation, and, she's at the top of her game, and I said, how are things going? And she said it was heaven to get to the top, and it can be hell to stay there. How was it for you at the top?
Yeah, no, she's got a great point, because when you're ascending, you're always getting to new places, and it's always exciting, and if you're going to get demoted at any point, it's like, well, I was just here last week anyway, so who cares? And that's how I viewed it, climbing up to the minor leagues and all that. And, once you get to the highest level, there's only one way to go, and that's down. So to stay there, to continue to reinvent yourself, either as a musician or entertainer like Katie, or, as an athlete, it can be hell at times, absolutely. And you do start to lose a little of that innocence, like I was talking about before, and that's, I think, that fun, that joy, just that pure-heartedness is what's going to get you through. Because, at least for me, I started to become too rigid, started to feel like, well, I'm this guy, and I achieved this, so I'm entitled to this, and I expect this, and you need to treat me this way. And, man, that was not how I operate. And so I'm just running the other direction from that kind of stuff these days.
Greg, my great producer here, Liz gave me about 15 questions for you, but the main one he wanted me to ask you is, the number 75 is not a usual baseball number. Why did you pick that number?
Yeah, well,
you can address this to Greg. He's listening.
Dear Greg, 75 is just an exercise in aesthetics, really. I mean, my number coming up was 34, through college and the minor leagues, and when I got to Oakland, that number was already retired by Raleigh Fingers, who, the great Raleigh Fingers. So I just started going, 35 up, down anywhere, what would look best with my last name, Zito, across the top of it. And it was 57 or 75. Kind of, they both have that little shelf that can hold the two letters on each side. And then I figured if I had 57, there was a pretty, a bad chance that I'd have that number if I ever went to another team, because it's a common number. So I went with the opposite, 75.
And I'm also here with Brian Levine, who's a teacher of Transcendental Meditation in New York. And he asks a question. He said, do you think that Transcendental Meditation could get big in Major League Baseball? And if so, what would be the appeal for it?
I do. Baseball is kind of known as the most archaic of the major sports here in the United States. You look at sports like the Olympics, and they're always on the cutting edge of technology and all these things, and even into the NFL. The NFL is constantly changing their programs and things like that with new discoveries and technology and science and different gear and all that stuff. In baseball, I mean, you still got some very old school approaches in baseball. So I think that baseball will probably be the last to come around, but I definitely think it could thrive, as long as we remind these guys that, hey, this isn't going to make you less of a man, and I think yoga, it was kind of the beginning of that. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, it started becoming a sport, and at first people were opposed to it, and now they're like, oh, yoga's awesome. You got these big, strong, studly men talking about it. So I think TM is kind of going to follow in that suit, where we got to remind these guys that it's not a threat to anyone's masculinity, and that it's fine, and that this can get you more centered.
It's interesting. That's a great answer. It's interesting because baseball is the least sort of well, at least football and, basketball, sort of the intensity of basketball and football, sort of more, in some ways, more rough and tumble. And
Sure.
And just in the last few months, I've been in talks with the National Football League. They're very interested in possible use of Transcendental Meditation initially for players what they suffer from, everybody knows about this post-concussive disorder, and the notion that stress exacerbates concussion, traumatic brain injury, concussion. And so they're interested in also National Basketball Association. So I think that we've hit a tipping point, and I actually, in America, just for meditation in general, and specifically Transcendental Meditation, where several years ago and for a long time, the word meditation either scared people, there was so much misunderstandings, oh, it's got to be a religion, or it's a sect, or it's Eastern, or I could never do it because my mind is so crazy busy. And just, Barry, in the last year or so, I've been teaching this for longer than you've been alive, for 42 years. So I started teaching, you weren't even born yet. And in the last year or so, there's been this absolute change in trajectory where everybody's interested. And the whole idea of the word meditation, they're just, I need something like that. I need to have some inner calm. I need to have some inner clarity. I need to have some inner focus. And the notion that sometimes the difference, you have 2 or 3 great athletes or musicians or business, traders in business, and it's a mental game. How resilient are you? How do you handle that setback? How do you handle those ups and downs? And that's the way the brain functions. That's cortisol levels. Isn't it interesting that it's not a pill? Modern medicine has no drug that you can take to really prevent trauma or stress or even heal it. You can mask it. And that something as ancient and universal as accessing the calm and silence that exists within every human being through transcendental meditation, that is turning out to be the antidote and the sort of magic elixir, if you want, to improve performance and help a person handle anxiety and stress. So I do think in my experience, baseball, is it the kids coming out of school younger? They don't go to college so much? What do you think?
Yeah, with the baseball stuff, you have the option to come out after high school, if you're playing well enough to get signed there by a team, or you can wait 3 years, come out of a major university. But I agree. With the TM, it's helping things at the core level. It's like taking your vitamins so you don't get sick instead of getting sick and then taking something to make the headache go away. You always want to treat it at the causal level, and the TM is erasing things before they can even, have a presence.
You're more very articulate. I should turn the show over to you, Barry. I remember when I first taught you to meditate, right away, you sort of I said some of the most significant experiences right from the beginning. The analogy I use to describe what happens in TM is the analogy of an ocean, where you have waves on the surface of the ocean and it can be very choppy, and that's the analogous to the surface thinking mind. That's the thinking mind, the worrying mind, the anxious mind, or just the planning mind, the gotta mind. And that, we struggle with. But then the hypothesis is that deep within every human being, like an ocean has silence at its depth, everyone has a level of the mind deep within where the mind is already calm and quiet and silent, and that this meditation just gives access to that, effortless access to that. And I say again, we're not talking about a philosophy, we're not talking about a religion, we're not talking about a change in lifestyle. And just adding that, I think when you look in the world today, stress is now being considered, the black plague of the 21st century. And I think it's driving people to look for alternative or integrative approaches like transcendental meditation. But what I like about it, and I want to have you talk about it, is it does more than just release stress. It does more than that. How has it helped you with your own sense of self, with your clarity, or has it, or happiness or ability to relate to others? Has it had an impact in those ways?
It has. It's enabled me to, there was this book, The Four Agreements, I think I read it years ago, but one of the major things was don't take anything personally. And so, what the TM has done for me, it's enabled me to stay kind of in my bubble, saying that, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. And if somebody comes up to me, whether it's on the street or in the stadium or whatever, and they're saying things to me or this or that, the TM has helped me stay in that bubble of calm. And I'm saying this guy is simply projecting his own anger about his own life, his own feeling of insignificance or unworthiness, or, he wants to make a difference, so he's going to scream at me in front of his friends, or, whatever all those things are. And it enabled me to have a greater perspective of what's really going on, instead of, it's all about me and I'm taking things personal and people are waking up thinking about me every day and how to make my life hell. That wasn't the case. And so, going back to that quiet place, that serene, place in my own mind, enables me to say, no, I'm good. I'm here, and things are calm. And if somebody wants to come over and disturb, my sea of tranquility with some big rogue waves, that's on them. That's not mine. And that was very helpful for me.
You have almost, your things, as far as I can see, the way you live your life, and I think it's because you are, and I'm not just saying this to be nice, I mean a lot of people, but you're one of the most extraordinary human beings I've ever met, Barry. And everybody who knows you says that. I mean, all the players on the team love you, and the awards that you won, the Lou Gehrig Award and the Hutch Award, everybody talks so, just you're an amazing human being. And I think somehow I used to think about these crazy things that would happen in your life, an injury or something. I don't like to use the word spiritual in a religious sense because I'm not, but it really forced you to not buy into so much the outer glory, the outer, seduction of the fame and fortune, and to really know who you are at your core. I was talking to Hugh Jackman about it, and you remind me a lot of Hugh in the quality of integrity and authenticity and kindness to everybty. And he said,
really nice,
well, it's true. He may act better than you, but you pitch a lot better than he does.
Well, that's really nice. I just think that at the end of the day, what fulfills us the most, in our life, is it somebody that talks good about us? Is it an award? Is it a paycheck? Those things are pretty. They feel good in the moment, but when you're asleep on your pillow at night, there's still a discontent in our hearts. I think so. The real fulfillment's in the heart, man. It's being happy. It's appreciating people around you. It's being grateful. It's being a man of integrity. I think those kind of things are what really fulfill us in our life.
And what I also love about you is your devotion to your religion. Talk a little bit about that you found Christ, you and your wife. Talk about that.
I did, yeah. I mean, it was kind of a backwards way to do it because so many people are raised in the box and they're trying to get out of it as they become, an adult and into their, later years. And I was raised out of the box, and I needed a box to get into. I was like, there's no structure. I need something that's not ever evolving, with the synapses of my brain from day to day. And so, in 2011, I got into this car accident right before my first game of the year, and it was in Los Angeles. And, I was bullheaded, so I flew in therapists and chiropractors and 3 days of therapy, and I ended up making my start, and I didn't disrupt this long streak I had of not missing a game. And then 2 weeks later, I injured this very small, kind of peculiar ligament in the foot, which is like an unheard of injury in baseball. And at that point, I missed about 3 or 4 months. And it was then that I sat back and said, all right, something somewhere is telling me to just chill out and stop, being bullheaded and going full steam. And in August of that year is when, I became Christian and really just said, I want to live for something greater, for someone greater, for God. I don't want to live for myself and my desires anymore and all these things, and really just trying to tie everything that I desire or want back to, how to serve God, how to serve others. And it's been, hasn't been easy, and it's certainly not an automatic change, but it's been a lot more fulfilling.
Thank you, Barry. We're going to take a break here, and we'll be right back. This is Success Without Stress on Sirius XM Indie. I'm Bob Roth, your host.
This is Success Without Stress with Bob Roth on Sirius XM Indie. Bob Roth, Executive Director of the David Lynch Foundation, has helped people from all walks of life transform their lives. This is Success Without Stress with Bob Roth on Sirius XM Indie.
This is Success Without Stress on Sirius XM Indie. This is your host, Bob Roth. I'm with my friend Barry Zito, All-Star Cy Young Award-winning pitcher for 14 years with the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland A's, and an all-around great human being. Last night, we were talking on the phone before the show, and you were talking to me about your backyard. You've moved to a city. I'm not going to say the city, but you've moved to a city. You have a backyard. It's an interesting story, and it just shows that the universe loves Barry Zito, or God loves Barry Zito. So tell us the story.
Yeah, so last season in September, my wife and I had to move from L.A. down to San Diego, and it's fine, I'll say the city. And we took in a family member of mine, and we just needed a rental, in an emergency situation. We had to rent a house and figure it out from there. And so we just got, basically the first house we could find. And then, cut to January this year, I started throwing and, getting back in shape and all these things. And I had been throwing about for 4 months. And this guy approached me who invented this pitching cage, the Mojo pitching cage, he calls it. And he wanted to set up kind of a mock catcher and hitter, wherever I had 60 feet to help me, work on my pitching this year. And I said, God, I'd love to put it in my backyard where I've been throwing, but I think I only have about 50 feet to work with. And he said, well, if you ever figure out where to do it, I'm happy to help you out. And so I went back home and just for kicks, I measured, and it ended up being about 68, 70 feet. And I was blown away that first I misjudged, the 60 foot 6 inches that I'd been pitching at my whole life. But, now the fact that this whole pitching cage is in my backyard, I have these 2 mannequins, a catcher and a hitter to pitch to. I have my portable mound. I got the radar gun, and I basically can simulate, being in a stadium pitching against a major league team and still be right there next to my wife and son. And, how it worked out that I had, give or take a couple feet on the width and the length, the perfect pitching backyard setup. I mean, I'll never be able to figure that one out.
We say nature knows best how to organize. And now tell me what it's like for you to be at 36 years old, a dad.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was single, I always kind of thought, yeah, I get it. You got kids. It's amazing. It's life-changing. I understand. I mean, I think as single people, we hear that from a lot of friends, but we never can know exactly what it is. And the second that Marsden came out, it just was so surreal. And I had an opportunity to literally pull him out of my wife by the head, which was just, I mean, it was just so surreal. And just to be able to care for him. And the coolest part is seeing my wife in a whole new light. I mean, to see her do, nature's work of caring for her young, I'm kind of falling in love with my wife in a whole new way now. It's just been so great to have, a true family now.
Amber's such a beautiful woman. I call her Royal Amber. She just has this quality about her that's just so sublime. And Mars is lucky to have you and Amber as parents, that's for sure, just as you're lucky to have him as your child. But it's really... So now I'm going to spin back in the next few minutes. What do you miss most about Major League Baseball? Why are you going, why are you working on it? Why do you want to get back to it? Not just, okay, it's a salary and all that stuff, but what at the core are you missing about it?
Yeah, no, it actually has nothing to do with paycheck. It has nothing to do with status or any of that. It's just about, I started playing baseball and when I came to the major leagues to accomplish some things, to achieve some things. And, there's no way that I could retire and walk away from the game unless I gave every ounce of, commitment and discipline over these last, over a 15-month span, essentially, from 13 to the 15 season. There's no way I could do it. And the thing I miss most now is, ironically, it's less probably about the competition. It's more about just the camaraderie with the guys and being out there and traveling and just being a part of something greater, being a part of a team that's tied to a city. And, it's just a whole unification, with a region. And it's a really special thing,
What's it like to be in the zone? What's it like, you perform at the highest level, and when you perform always at the highest level, but those moments when you're just absolutely all cylinders, it's like almost a cosmic sort of thing. What does it feel like when you're on the mound and you're just, do you have words for it?
It feels, probably like you've heard before, it's just that calm. I think at my peak performance, it's just been driven by joy. It's been driven by fun. This is going to be fun today, instead of like a fear-based, I hope this doesn't happen. This could be a terrible experience. And whenever it's kind of an experience that's based on love, as opposed to fear, it seems to go okay, win or loss. And so, being in the zone for me is just about taking one pitch at a time and just trying to enjoy just the sheer act of pitching itself and not, the destination of what it might bring.
Do you know, like when you walk out on the mound or you're warming up at the beginning of the game, do you know I got it or I don't have it, or is it just one of these things that unfolds itself as the game goes along?
Yeah, I think all you can know is that you feel good. I think the more self-conscious you get and the more kind of third party you become on yourself, the worse things will get generally. That's for me at least. If I can say, oh, I'm a stud or I'm this or, I'm a pretty interesting guy or, you know what I mean? Most times that'll blow up in my face. If I say, listen, I'm just speaking from the heart and I just love doing this, people will be like, gosh, you just did amazing today. It's like, oh, I did? I was just really trying to enjoy it today. But when you start to think of how kind of amazing you are, people are going to let you know that that's not the case.
And I often find, people will say, oh, that was a great idea. I always say, the worst ideas are mine. The best ideas are, nature's or God's or universes that just sort of go through you, that you really can't take any authorship or ownership for because it was just, you were almost just like a vehicle. And the Beatles, when they talk about the great music they wrote or other artists or performers, it's those times that you are simplest and not getting in the way and you're not sort of, oh, I'm so good. And the whole thing is just happening almost through you. Is that your experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think if you can remain an open channel and doing that, and I think fun and joy is the way to keep that channel open. I think trying to, treating pitching as a vehicle is, what I did later in my career. It was a vehicle to something else. But, early in my career, and what I'm trying to get back to is that pitching is the destination. Writing the song is the destination. Being creative is the destination. I'm not trying to write a hit song that someone later will tell me is great. And I think that's where, we all kind of get caught up.
Do you stay in touch with any of the players on the Giants? I know Jake Peavy he came and sang when I was at spring training with you a few years ago. You had a dinner. And Jake came, and he was then with the Chicago White Sox, and now he's pitching with the Giants. Do you stay in touch, or are you just pretty much on your own now that the off season? It must have been strange. Also, you probably played baseball every summer since you were 1 year old. So to have a summer off, what has that been like?
Oh yeah, well yeah. First, I do keep in touch with probably 6-7 guys on the Giants, and a couple more throughout the game. The friendship certainly supersedes the team. But having a summer, and especially in San Diego where I grew up, has just been awesome. I mean, I haven't surfed since, I think, March, but I was surfing really solid for about 6-7 months there but once I started training, I shut it down. But, just having a regular summer, a regular life, kind of, being with the family and going down to the beach and on Sundays and, that kind of thing is something I never knew since I was, 14 years old.
I'm such a fan of yours, and, I love and appreciate you so much. And some of my friends, with the David Lynch Foundation, big fan of yours. And it's been a relief for us this year, too, Barry, because not having every fifth game, you go out and pitch. I say, oh, gosh, and I, text with Amber, the fifth inning, and we, yay, and you struck out the side or something. So it's been a break for all of us, Barry. It's been a break. Mars is cruising, but it's been a break for all of us. So we're ready to go next year. We're ready to go next year.
Good, yeah, I'm glad everyone could kind of chill out, and I want to stretch you guys out every fifth day, and, we'll be ready to rock, April next year.
Well, I want to thank you very, very much for taking this hour out of your day here in August, your summertime off from your family and your workout. It means a lot to me, and to be able to spend this kind of time with you, Barry. You're, as I said before, extraordinary human being. I meet a lot of people, and you're just right at the very top, and I'm glad that the listeners got to get just a glimpse of why everybody in Major League Baseball loves you, why Mars, your son, you're a great guy. In addition to being a great guy, fabulous pitcher, fabulous competitor, genuine to the core, just wanting to do well by yourself, by the team, by obviously your family, by God, and appreciate the fact of your support for the work we're doing with the David Lynch Foundation of bringing Transcendental Meditation to at-risk populations. It means a lot to them, and I wanted to say I think one of the reasons why there has been such a uptick in interest in TM is that you have, gone public, and people respect and love you. And when they say, well, gosh, if Barry Zito, who's a family man and a man of God, and he practices Transcendental Meditation, and it helps him, maybe it's something I should look into. So really want to thank you very much. It means a lot.
Oh, absolutely, Bobby. Well, it's a pleasure to be on here and chat with you as a friend, and to certainly help the cause of, just helping people in whatever realm of life they find themselves in, to just have a little more peace, a little more calm, a little less stress, and just more serenity within themselves.
I'm looking forward to meeting Mars.
Well, Mars is too, buddy. We'll definitely get this going soon.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Thank you very much, Barry.
This is Success Without Stress with Bob Roth on Sirius XM Indie.